Del Rey has this song, Pretty When You Cry, where she spends the entire song talking about how terrible her lover treats her and how he is consistently choosing his drug use over her and how terrible that is. But how the reason why he treats her terribly is because she's beautiful when she cries. This phenomenon of finding pain in female suffering is very, very common, and it is inextricably linked to the existence of patriarchy. I found this whole idea of finding female pain really beautiful and finding my own pain as a woman really beautiful most evident when I was struggling with anorexia several years ago. And what was odd was that when I was hungry, I found my hunger pain not ugly or sad or difficult to deal with, but in fact really beautiful. I actively enjoyed my suffering in that way. Saying all of that out loud is really weird and uncomfortable, but I think that when you understand the reasons why we romanticize female suffering and how that can lead to finding your own suffering as a woman really beautiful, it all makes a lot of sense. We glamorize female suffering in motherhood, always congratulating women for the fact that they gave up all of their interests and aspirations to become moms, worked multiple jobs, still came home at the end of the night to do all of the domestic labor to raise their children. And this is this very common story even amongst married women, aka mothers who have husbands that can be there to do the washing up and cooking meals and putting the kids to bed and doing bath time or whatever, but it's still the woman's responsibility. I think that you see this very clearly on Mother's Day when men go around talking about how amazing it is that their mothers gave up so much to take care of them. This is never a story that I have found to be all that heartwarming. I think that the desire for women to suffer is also really obvious in this weird trend of men wanting and actively pursuing women who have mental health problems or saying that they want a woman with daddy issues. The amount of women I have talked to who have said that they've found men on dating apps who in their bios will joke about wanting a girl with mental health problems. And I just don't. I think that they mean it, TBH. I think beauty practices are another great example, wanting women to starve, wanting women to go through invasive and uncomfortable procedures, wanting women to spend an extraordinary amount of money and go through literal physical pain, laser, waxing, whatever, in order to be pretty. Or the fact that something like crying and vomiting is a very common trope or generally thing to happen in PORN scenes, and how that's not seen as an issue at all either. Over and over and over again, our society paints a very clear picture that we love it when women are in pain. But where does all of that come from? In nearly all cases of glamorizing female suffering, that suffering exists to directly serve male interests. So with something like in the motherhood example, that woman suffering, not being able to have any of her own interests, giving up everything to raise her children, doing this constant labor, physical demanding labor, who gains something from that? The man in the household who virtually doesn't need to do anything in order to raise his children. When women go through very intense beauty procedures or just generally go to very far lengths in order to be beautiful, who does that help? It's about making yourself desirable to men. I know that that's a hot take, but that's a whole other video. Or if we're talking about something like the PORN or even beauty in a way, it is about men's sexual availability to women or women's sexual availability. Whatever, then you know what I'm saying. The success of the patriarchy is entirely dependent on female suffering. Getting women to exist as constant house slaves and sex robots, basically, is entirely dependent on women being okay suffering while doing that, because no one can fulfill that role without being in pain. If every single woman, mother in particular, woke up one day and said, you know what, I don't want to have to live a life like this. I don't want to have to do the vast majority of the domestic labor. I would love to have time to pursue my other interests and the other parts of myself that make me me. In order for me to do that, I'm going to need my husband to step up. I'm going to need him to be doing the bedtime routine. I'm going to need him to be making the meals. I'm going to need him to be helping me usher back and forth from soccer practice and wherever. I'm going to need him to majorly step up the amount of effort. If every single woman woke up and did that, men across the globe are going to start being asked to do very demanding, intense labor that they have not been being asked to do so far. Y'all tell me how well you think that's going to work. But all we're seeing here is that we like that women hurt because we directly benefit from women's hurt. This ultimately works to greatly impact women's sense of self. A major part of how we define perfect womanhood is this tolerance for misery. If you want to be a good woman, you need to have this major appetite for pain. If I wanted to be beautiful, if I wanted to be desired by men, if I wanted to play into their fantasies, I was going to need to be okay being in pain, whether that's the pain of trying to be pretty, if that is the pain of fulfilling their often very depraved sexual fantasies, whatever way that takes, if it's the pain of being a mother and doing all of the labor that it takes to raise children, whatever flavor that comes from, I'm going to need to be okay taking that on. This is how women themselves come to find their own misery to be really beautiful, because it is a direct representation of ideal womanhood. I always giggle a little bit whenever I see a TikTok of a girl just like crying. Like there's no other point to the video. It's like a sad audio and she's just crying. And it'll be like a really beautiful girl just crying in a video, right? And it's just one of the ways in which we find female pain really attractive, or women themselves being in pain and being like, wait, I look so pretty right now. Or like having conversations with girls and they'll be like humble bragging about the fact that they haven't eaten all day, and it's looked at as like a virtuous thing, like, oh, look at me, I'm hungry. And this is like all things I've done, by the way. I'm not dragging anyone. So going back to my experience with anorexia that I was talking about at the beginning of the video, of course when I was hungry, I found my hunger to be really beautiful. In that moment, I felt like I was becoming a woman, and I was becoming a desirable, beautiful woman. Not just in the fact that I was shrinking my body, but in the fact that I was like actively hurting. I was becoming the perfect damsel in distress for some man to come and save, hopefully very soon. That was my fantasy. So this culture of romanticizing suffering easily leads to women romanticizing their own suffering and actively pursuing and marinating in their own pain. Going back to Lana's song, Pretty When You Cry, she ends the song with the words, "I am stronger than all my men, except for you." I really like this lyric because Lana is saying that this is sort of the final boss of her pain. This man that's causing her all of this suffering, and in a way is making her a woman because of the suffering that she's enduring in order to have this relationship with him, is this like one thing that she cannot get over. I'm stronger than all of these other men, but the beauty that I have being in pain with you is not something that I can access in any other place. This is the thing that is making me a woman. This is the way that I self-actualize, and I cannot get over it. I cannot get above it. These words make me thoughtful about the idea that if we want to help women build a sense of self, if we all individually want to become more confident, we need to remove this allure of beauty and desire and fantasy and allure that surrounds female suffering. Sadness is sad. Sadness is heartbreaking. Sadness is devastating. And the same kind of gut-wrenching pain and empathy that we feel watching men be in pain, because we afford them that dignity and we have a collective societal desire to see men succeed, that is the same response that we need to have towards female suffering. It is weird because it's moving towards a world that many of us have never really seen before. The idea of if every woman is truly happy and pursuing self-actualization and joy in whatever way that manifests for her, then that means we're going to be missing out on a lot of the labor that is dependent on her suffering. And that's going to open a very big gap that we're going to have to very carefully find a way to fulfill. At least on an individual basis, looking at your own suffering and realizing this is not helping me in any meaningful way. That was what I had to do at some point with my disordered eating. This is not helping me in any meaningful way, and this isn't going to be anything that's going to give me any sort of genuine fulfillment at the end of my life. It gives you a little bit of a stepping stone to let that go. this is an idea I've been musing on for a very long time, female suffering. And it feels weird. It feels really weird to say that I have found my suffering really beautiful. But I think the second that I understood it in this context, that all I really felt in that moment was the fact that I was a woman, then it was easier to accept and easier to say out loud that this was something that I have felt and that I've gone through. And I know it's something that a lot of other women have experienced as well. So hopefully this can plant the seeds for us to stop finding female pain so pretty and move in a better direction ultimately. But thank you for watching this video. I'm back on my YouTube grind. I have changed, if you follow me on Substack, I've changed my essay uploading schedule. So now with my free essays, I do 2 a week instead of two a month instead of 4 a month, so that I can now do 2 YouTube videos a month. Hopefully you followed that, whatever that was. But thank you guys so much. I hope that you subscribe, because now I have an actual schedule and I can be here consistently. And let me know what it is you want to hear from me. Bye, guys.